Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 305. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another episode with the fabulous Joanna Hennon. Today we are going to talk about forgiveness. Now, this is a topic we had come up with at the end of our last episode that we did together. And when we started kind of fleshing out the bullet points for today's episode, Joanna had a lot of resistance to it. And if you are one of those people who also has resistance to doing forgiveness work, I invite you to stay on and listen to this episode. It's really useful, I think, to consider why we might have resistance to something and how these things can actually really help us move forward in life. So what are you going to learn on this week's episode? We're going to talk about what is forgiveness? What does it mean? Is it important? And if so, why is it important? We talk about why we sometimes have trouble or resistance to doing this type of work. We talk about what's the purpose of forgiving? How does it help us in life? Why might we need to do it or want to do it? We talk about the different types of people and things that we might want to forgive, and we give you specific examples. We also share how to know when and who to forgive. What are the signs that you need to do the forgiveness work? We also talk about, do we always need to do forgiveness work? Like, is it always needed? And how to know when it's needed and when it's not. And you can just kind of get by now that you have the awareness of the situation. We also talk about how to journal on getting clarity on who or what you might need to forgive, what specific questions you might want to ask yourself. And we also talk about why forgiveness does not mean condoning bad behavior. Forgiveness is for us and not for the other person, and that's a really, really important thing. We also talk about how it's important not to use this forgiveness work as an excuse to not feel emotion and to just kind of bypass by doing the work and letting go. It can be very, very important to feel the emotion, the injustice, the anger, the hurt, the pain, whatever it is the situation caused, and then do the forgiveness work. So talk about all kinds of things. And as I said, there was some resistance to doing this episode. So hope you find this interesting and useful. We also share very specific ways, structures, rituals that you can use to actually do forgiveness work. So without further ado, I will hand you over the episode, and I hope you find this interesting and useful.
Hey, Joanna.
Hi, Holly.
I'm super excited about today's episode.
I'm a little less excited, but that's okay.
So today we are going to somewhat reluctantly talk about forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving other people. Should we forgive? Is it important? Why is it important? Why might you want to do this, and how? This is a topic that we came up with when we were doing our last episode, and I don't even remember why we decided we needed to talk about this, but I made a note of it. So we've been kind of going back and forth on whether or not to do this topic, and Joanna's a bit reluctant. So would you like to share why?
So I think it's actually interesting to kind of notice why, because it's a topic like any other, but like I'm a very kind of type A personality in terms of like being driven forward and ambitious and all these things. And so talking about forgiveness, I'm like, like, can we talk about something like more interesting with more excitement to it and more kind of sparkliness? Forgiveness seems very
soft.
Yeah, and I'm not great at soft. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it or that I don't do it, but it's not my natural state. And so like pretty much like my whole life has been kind of a journey to soften. So when this was proposed as a topic, like I know that it's important. Like I tell people it's important for sure. I recognize when I need to forgive. And yet like talking about it seems there's definite like resistance there. I'm like, would anybody even listen to this? So if you're listening to this and you think that this is a good topic, can you like PM me and let me know?
And if you enjoyed this episode, when it's over, please let Joanna know, because she needs to know that you care.
I need to know. On this particular topic, I need to know. This is something that's like helpful to talk about because I tend to just talk about stuff that's very results oriented rather than process oriented. Yeah, PM me. Let me know.
We have started. What I think is really interesting, though, is that you do a lot of the inner work. You do the Psych-K. You do mindset work. And I know that's very kind of logical work rather than the soft forgiveness work, but you're doing inner work. Like you do a lot of that stuff. So I think it's very interesting that this particular flavor of inner work.
Yeah, I find it really, really much easier to do things that we collectively group under mindset than to do the things that are more emotion-based. So this is, I think, one of the reasons why I love Psych-K is that it's beliefs-based and it's very rational.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware, Holly, and I mean, I may not have mentioned this to you, but I'm very aware that sometimes I choose to do Psych-K because I don't want to do the emotional stuff. I'm very aware of this. That even someone like me who's really committed to this process and teaches this stuff, even I have to really be very conscious of where I'm avoiding going a little bit deeper or avoiding feeling emotions that I don't want to feel or bringing up stuff from the past I don't want to think about or the stuff that's past that was painful. I don't particularly like to rehash.
Okay, so I'm with you on that. I'm not great with the emotion stuff either. And I'm doing this plant spirit initiation apprenticeship. And yes, I have cried on it, but I feel like lots of other people are doing so much more crying. And I'm like, I feel like I should be crying more. Like, there's just something wrong with me that I'm not having such an emotional time of it. Whether that's like an Aspie thing. Because I know sometimes we have problems with emotions or identifying emotions, but I haven't been having as rough a time as some other people are. And again, I'm comparing myself. I shouldn't be, but I do still.
I don't think it's just about the crying either, because I cry all the time. And that doesn't mean that I'm doing like deep emotional healing.
Right.
Like I cry at commercials. Like anytime, like I cry at any graduation, like even if it's like Lisa Simpson. It's a family joke, like I'll cry at anything. And so that's not the same thing. And I do think that maybe our being less good with the emotional stuff is an Aspie thing.
Yeah, because I feel like when I do the plant spirit healings, I shift deep emotional stuff, but without actually feeling the emotions. I don't know.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that's an Asperger's thing. So
okay, all right.
I also have that detachment almost.
Yeah.
And so maybe, Holly, on this podcast about forgiveness, we have identified something that we need to forgive ourselves for not being able or, whatever word you want to use to feel that deep emotion or, because if it is an Asperger's thing, and I think it is, then that explains a lot about my own misunderstanding with emotion. Like I don't really know. We had to look up forgiveness to see how it's defined in a dictionary.
Yeah.
And I have the same thing with when I started hiring coaches, I remember, I would hire these coaches and they'd be like, what are you feeling? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to use that language. Like, I can't identify things and name them in those terms. And that, of course, is an Aspie thing. So that's separate.
Right. So that means that 99% of the people listening to this will not have the problem that we're having, probably.
Exactly. So let's move into forgiveness itself.
Yeah. What is it?
Yes. We mentioned that we looked up the definition. And so forgiveness means, according to the definition, to stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. So we're going to start our discussion with this idea of stopping to feel angry or resentful.
Yeah, and that can be feeling angry or resentful towards someone else or towards yourself.
Or towards a situation.
Yeah.
Or towards like a country.
Ah, yeah.
There's a lot of things you can be angry or resentful.
Yeah.
Angry at or resentful towards. So first of all, why would you want to forgive? Because I know a lot of people who hang on to stuff because they think it's better.
Yeah.
Not forgive because they don't want to forget what's happened to them. I think it's that. They just don't want to forget. Like, they don't want to make the same mistake.
Yeah.
And so they hang on to that thing because that anger like reminds them that this is something they shouldn't do, or this is the type of person they shouldn't date, or like that emotion, helps them. They think the emotion helps them. So why is it important to forgive, or are they right?
I don't think they're necessarily right, but like I understand that mindset because I think there's also a sense of justice there. Like this thing that they did to me was wrong and it was not fair, it was not just, and so therefore I'm going to hold on to this resentment as like punishment.
And also because I'm right. A lot of the time it's true.
Yeah.
The person did something crappy and it wasn't fair. So I'm justified in feeling this way. And hanging on to that is my justification that I'm right.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not helpful because at the end of the day, the only thing that happens is that you feel angry.
You feel angry and you feel terrible.
I think the most important thing about forgiveness is to understand that it's not about the other person. It's about you. So when you choose to forgive so that you are lighter, so that you can feel better, so that you can move forward in a different energy and experience something else instead of the thing that you were angry at or for. It doesn't go against you thinking that it was unfair or that the other person did something wrong.
Yeah, exactly. By forgiving the other person, you're not condoning their behavior. You're just letting go of the crap that you have inside yourself so that you can move forward. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you're holding on to this resentment because you don't want to repeat it, you're probably still going to repeat it because you're focusing on that thing. But when you let go of it and you move forward, that, I think, is what helps you release the pattern and not go back to that same situation.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree, which is why it's important to forgive and not hang on to stuff. So when you notice that you're angry or for a certain thing, then that's your sign that there's something there to work on. And kind of maybe like a better word for forgiveness would be to make peace with.
Yeah.
We're not negating that something happened, even that something awful happened. But you want to choose to move forward in an energy of peace rather than conflict.
Yeah, it's like you're detaching from it. It's like the thing happened, it was shitty, but you're kind of detaching emotionally from it so that you can make peace with it and move forward.
Yeah, it's the only way to move forward in peace, right? And otherwise, like you're constantly in battle mode almost.
Yeah.
I think that's the danger of not being aware of forgiveness and that importance to let go. And we know many people like this, right? Like people who just live in the past.
Yeah.
And every time you talk to them, they're bringing up stuff from 5 years ago and 8 years ago and whatever. And it happens like some people actually like live in the past and like that's all they live by are those things that happen to them. For some of us, it just comes up once in a while, right? Like, and when you see something come up, I had an argument with my husband recently where I said something and then I said some other things and then I said some other things that happened like 5-10 years ago. And he was like, "You're rehashing all the old stuff now, aren't you?"
You're digging deep.
Like, it's still relevant. And like, I realized that I still hadn't forgiven him for those things.
Wow.
Because, they may be like small things or it doesn't really matter. Like they were part of something bigger, but in themselves they were small. But the fact that like my mind still went to those things as proof.
Yeah. You haven't let go of them.
What I was mad at him for now just shows that I hadn't forgiven him for those things. So I could address that, right? Because it became conscious.
Yeah. Okay. So did you do anything to address that? Did you do the forgiveness work or?
No. And I'm just thinking about that now. Like, do we always need to do forgiveness work and quote unquote? Like, I almost feel like bringing it to the surface and laughing about it with him was enough. Like, I didn't feel a need to like sit down and do some kind of ritual around it. I think like we've talked about this before, Holly, like with mindset work in general and inner work in general, like sometimes it's enough to become conscious of something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it needs something deeper. How do you know? Because it keeps showing up.
Yeah. So like if in your next argument with Joe, you bring up the thing from 5-10 years ago, then you're going to be like, okay, clearly it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Now saying this, I have a very, very vivid memory of about a month ago over another argument that was very big, actually sitting down. I forgot about this. I keep saying I don't do it, but I did sit down and I did actually forgive him for very specific things. And I used Psych K to do it.
Oh, tell me how. Well, I guess we can't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No. Tell you after.
Sorry, guys. You need to do the training. You're not supposed to talk about this publicly.
I use belief statements because when I tap into those energies, then I was able to feel what the things were that I needed to forgive him for, and I didn't know that.
Right, of course. So you would just create a belief statement and balance
Yeah.
for it. Oh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and so it wasn't like I didn't write him a big emotional letter, but I was able through that process to identify the very specific things that I hadn't forgiven him for that I didn't really think needed forgiveness in the first place.
Yeah.
And it was very, very eye-opening. So yeah, but this in particular time, I didn't feel the need for that. So I guess, but what I'm saying in a very kind of long-winded way is that like with any mindset work or any energy work, like you have to just follow like what feels right.
Yeah.
If you're super miserable and crying for days because of an argument or something they said or something someone did or whatever, then there's something like deep going on that you need to sit down and be like, okay, what's going on? Like, why am I really mad? I think that's what I started with actually, is like just journaling it out. Like,
Yeah.
what am I really mad about? Like, why do I hate him right now? You know, and why do I hate all of this? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Because I think asking those questions and doing the journaling helps us to put into words the shit that we're feeling inside ourselves.
Yeah. And you think that the argument is about one thing. It's so funny that like I told you I don't do any forgiveness work. And this is a very recent, very deep example that it completely like escaped me. I didn't remember it at all. Right now, like live in the live recording. But like it was very interesting to me that what came out as an answer to that question of what am I actually mad about was something from many, many years ago. You know, like I wasn't actually mad about what he said in this particular situation. I was still mad about something that had happened a long time ago. And I couldn't have identified that if I hadn't sat down with my journal and asked that question.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point because it really helps us to get clarity, especially for those of us who aren't good at emotions.
Yeah, people might not be good at emotions for a whole load of reasons, right? So if you're listening to this, like you don't have to be Aspie to like not be able to do emotions so well. You know, there might be other reasons. But yeah, so the point we're making here is to kind of follow what you feel is needed. And in fact, what your experience is showing you is needed.
Yeah.
If it goes away, then great. And if it keeps coming back, the pattern or the same sort of situation, then you need to kind of get to the root.
So how else might you know that you need to do forgiveness work? Like, what are some signs?
Well, anger is a good Anger is a good one. I tend to notice, for other people, I think it's anger. For me, that's usually the sign. And I don't always feel anger towards that person, but like when I feel anger, I kind of trace it to something. And then forgiveness is usually part of it. But when I need to forgive myself, then it's not anger. That's my sign. It's more like a belief or a thought pattern that I don't want.
Or negative mind chatter, like always beating yourself up over something. Like, oh, I'm never good with this. I suck at this.
Actually, it's those words, right? Always and never.
Yeah. I can never get this right. I'm never going to make this happen.
That's, I think, the easiest sign to notice that there's something that you need to, probably in your past, that created that belief in the first place, that you suck at this or suck at that. And then you need to, just like Holly and I at the beginning of this episode, right?
Yeah.
We started off with a lot of negative self-talk, public negative self-talk about how we're really bad at the emotional stuff.
Yeah.
And we identified it as something that probably needs some forgiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some other examples of things or people that we might need to forgive?
Let's see. So we can forgive ourselves. We can forgive others.
People from our past, like if people were bullied as children, that might still be kind of having ripple effects.
Yeah,
Teachers or other authority figures that said shitty things to us.
Politicians.
Yeah.
Even like countries. Like I had to make peace with the concept of Belgium, and I had to make peace with the concept of Poland. It's not entirely forgiveness, but that energy of making peace with something.
Yeah.
So that you're not constantly, angry or resentful towards it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And any concept, really. Like in Psych K, we have a concept called relationship balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can actually balance a relationship not only between people, but between you and concepts.
Yeah.
So you could forgive money or balance your relationship with money, right? Like if you
Yeah.
feel that money has mistreated you. And in fact, a lot of like money work, including what I do in the soul space with money, there's a whole module on money. It includes things like writing a letter to money and writing a letter from money to you and like that energy level. Like, do you feel money was unfair to you? You know, that's often the thing,
Yeah.
right? Money versus other people. Like that's another example of like not being chosen or being rejected or whatever. So any kind of sort of concepts, like I've had to do that sort of, either you want to call it forgiveness or relationship balance or making peace with or whatever, with concepts even. Like I was mad at the concept of manifesting. And I was like this sucks. Like you work for other people, you're not working for me.
Yeah.
Right? I was mad at my business.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done relationship balances with my business over the years.
Right? It's whatever it is that you're angry at. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not a person. Sometimes it's your spirit guides because you think like they're not doing their job because you're not getting what you want.
So for people who haven't trained in something like Psych K, how else can people do forgiveness work or forgive? Because I think for me, at least, it's more than like, I can't just be like, oh, I forgive so-and-so. I forgive myself for this. Like, I need to do more than that.
Well, I think we all need ritual, right? I'm someone who always said I don't like ritual because that concept, like I just immediately, my mind goes to like really, really like hippie, heya, like I don't like that sort of thing, you know, with loads of candles and you have to be quiet and concentrate. I don't like being quiet and concentrating on it. Like that is not my thing. But I've learned that in fact I have a lot of rituals and I've been exploring like how you can use ritual in different ways. And of course, all it does is focus your energy, right? So any sort of ritual that you create or take on that will help you to focus your energy, focus your mind on a certain thing, on a certain outcome, on releasing energy will work, right? So, I mean, you can write, I've done this before. I've written a letter, right? I wrote a letter to an abusive ex-boyfriend about a very specific thing, right? So a very specific moment in time that for some reason kept coming back to me. And I can't tell you what it is because I don't remember, which just shows you that.
Wow.
Yeah, that it worked. I remember like kind of remember, but not really. So it definitely worked, right? And so you can write a letter to let it all out and then burn it like with intention, like of releasing the energy. Like that's a really easy way of forgiving. And it's the same kind of process as, you know, clearing beliefs and all that. Like it's just the power of your intention that does it.
I think it's got a few parts. It's getting really clear on what it is that you want to release by either writing the letter or writing the belief statements and then release it, setting the intention to release.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, you don't know what it is that you want to release until you write the letter, right?
Yeah.
It's sometimes difficult, like there's something that's coming back to you, but you don't really know. So just block off the time and write. Over the years, like, I have kind of dabbled with a lot of different techniques, a lot of fancy stuff and whatever. And it all boils down to the same thing. And that's making space. Like, actually put it in your calendar. Like, show the universe and yourself that this is important. Like, block off 2 hours and call it forgiveness or energy or write letter to X.
Yeah.
Right? So that it's clear that it's a thing. It's not kind of done in between other stuff. You're setting aside time and creating some kind of space in your life, in your world for this. And then some kind of way to signify, to symbolize the thing leaving your energy system, right? And that can be done in lots of ways. And maybe this is a good time for you to talk about your favorite way, Holly. Just hop on a mo? No?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite way because I don't do this work often enough to have a favorite way. But yeah, I have in the past used Ho'oponopono, which we will link to in the show notes. But it's a Hawaiian prayer that basically goes, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And you can just repeat it. However, like I've really enjoyed doing it in the past by sitting in the whole brain posture, which is something you learn in Psych K. We can't teach it to you, but you can Google it and see something online.
Well, just to clarify, it's not a Psych K concept. It predates Psych K, so you can completely Google it and use it.
Yeah. So by sitting in that position and doing the 4 statements, like identifying a specific person and saying, you know, I'm sorry, and just repeating I'm sorry over and over again until I felt it shift, and then saying, please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me until it shifted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, waiting for the shift, and then I love you. And that really only takes 5 minutes or so. But that felt really powerful to me because it uses a technique that I know works for me in other circumstances. And it gives me a really easy ritual to do the forgiveness. So that's worked for me in the past. And
I like having something physical.
Yeah.
So I've never done that. But when I have used Ho'oponopono, I always say it wrong. When I have used it, all I've done is written things down on a piece of paper, like bullet points.
Yep.
Like either a situation or like my father for saying this, my brother for doing this, like, or my brother did this. Like, I can't remember how I phrase it. It doesn't really matter, honestly, as long as you kind of capture the essence of what it is that's kind of bothering you or what you want to release the energy of. Like, just focus your attention on each one of those things and focus your attention on your brother doing that thing and say the words, right? Say the Hawaiian prayer. And then cross it out. Again, I like to be physical.
Yeah.
So then cross it out on a piece of paper. And that can be your symbolic way of saying when it's crossed out, it's let go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. So lots of people have resistance to doing this work. A lot of people kind of like, no, I should forgive, but I really don't want to. So what would you say to people who are like, I really don't want to do this?
Well, I mean, what I always say when you ask me these sorts of questions, Holly, is everybody has a choice, right?
Yeah.
And it's your choice. If you don't want to forgive, don't forgive. Like, that's your choice. As long as you're conscious, then you're carrying that energy with you, and it's probably definitely affecting your behaviors, right? So you're doing, the reason you would do forgiveness is to help yourself move forward in an easier, smoother way and have a different result, right? Because like if you ask yourself, like if I forgave myself for, okay, I'm going to give my example because I think the one that we were talking about before, because I think it's very clear. So I used to be super, super, super irresponsible with money. Mm-hmm. I have a very, very long history of doing like really, terrible money things. And this has been following around like this, I obviously picked up a belief or created a belief that I was irresponsible with money. And until I could forgive myself for being, not only like choose to be responsible now, but until I made peace with the choices I made in the past, I found that what was happening is I would keep repeating the pattern. So I would keep somehow always falling back into the pattern of feeling irresponsible. Like I wanted to make responsible choices, but then something would happen and I would be like, oh man, like that actually was a really irresponsible thing to do. It's like more proof that I'm irresponsible with money. So, and by making peace and kind of just this is not, it's not a judgment thing. I had to go in and be like, it's okay, younger me. You did the best you could. And it's okay that you were irresponsible. Nothing happened. We turned out okay. Like it's all good. And it was only then that the pattern could change because I could make my decisions and my choices not from a place of like trying to be responsible and trying to counteract something and but like my subconscious always wanting to find proof of being irresponsible, but from a place of peace with the past. And from there, you can really make a different choice for the future, right? And I've certainly found this to be true. And I do not consider myself irresponsible with money anymore. I have taken charge and it has allowed me to do a lot of things that I never thought I would be capable of doing, like learning how the stock market works and investing and stuff. And like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I understand what I'm doing. And yesterday I offered to like explain it to a friend who's an economist and she was a bit resistant. And I'm like, well, come over and I'll show you. Because I think like I have it sussed. Like I know what to do. I understand the different elements. And this was impossible. If you had asked me 15, 20 years ago, like this would have been like, you've got to be kidding. Like there's no way in hell. Like I'm so bad with money. So I forgot what the question was, but that was the answer.
Excellent. Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good example. And I think a lot of us have money stuff that requires forgiveness. Because as you were telling that story, I was thinking of, the whole 10 years that I was in business with my ex-business partner. And he was making really shitty decisions with money. And I didn't have the guts to stand up to him all the time. And so I went along with a lot of stuff that I'm not happy with. And I need to forgive. I need to do more forgiveness with him. but also forgiveness myself for not standing up and not getting out of that situation earlier and going along with stuff that was not ethical to me. That I've done so much work on this, and I know I've still got like remnants of it because it keeps coming back to me.
But eventually it goes. So,
yeah, it does. But
my clients get discouraged all the time. This is one of the things that I hear probably most. Like, I've done all this. I can't believe that it's happening again. Like, I thought this was done.
Yeah. No.
But it's never done, right? It's always layers of something. But that particular thing that you think is not, will never be done, it will be. Eventually it'll go away. Like, eventually you'll be able to feel different if you make certain choices.
Exactly. And if you do the work and if you're willing to let go of it. Like, I totally want to let go of the stuff. It's been 10 plus years since I left that situation, and I'm still healing stuff from it. But I've come a long, long, long way. So, it's just getting to the deeper layers.
Yeah. And choosing, this is slightly off topic, but it's coming up, so I'm going to say it. I feel like I find that this is a helpful way of looking at it, that you're choosing a different reality for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So in that concept of various parallel realities existing alongside each other where you can focus in on any one of your choice, why not focus in on one where you're at peace?
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it's easier to start there rather than to keep digging.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? Because I think part of my problem with forgiveness work and all this kind of work is that it's really easy to get stuck in it. And you could spend your whole life doing inner work and forgiveness work and writing letters and burning stuff and crossing things out on your piece of paper, and nothing would change. Because
you have to take the action.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to actually be the person for whom this thing that you want, this emotional state that you want, is true. So, perhaps for some of you, it will be a better starting point to think of that first.
Yeah.
To think of that person who is free of that stuff that you want to leave behind, whatever it is, who is free of that anger. And what does that actually look like, right? So once you do you can do the inner stuff, but don't forget to look forward. Now, the person who has forgiven themselves for being irresponsible with money, what kinds of choices do they make, right? They make choices where they are, they take charge of their financial reality.
Yeah.
Right? So I know what's in my bank account. I know how much I'm spending. I know how much is coming. I know all these things because I'm a responsible person. I'm a good manager of my money. So there are certain things, that go along with being this new version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that helps to kind of reframe it in that way. And as we were saying before we got on the call, I don't do forgiveness work all the time. I don't do gratitude work all the time because I do other stuff. And if we were to do all the inner work all the time, it would be a full-time job.
And a great procrastination technique.
Yeah.
Honestly, I find that a lot of people really get stuck in this and they make it the most important thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. It only works if it's done in combination with making those different choices in the present moment.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's going to create a new reality for you is what you choose to focus on today. That's the only thing. However, doing forgiveness work will help you to focus on, the right things, quote unquote, the things that you want rather than things you don't want. So that you spend your day in a place of peace rather than anger at your friend who stood you up, right?
Yeah, and it will help you take different actions, new actions, and break those patterns from the past.
Yeah.
So one thing that we wanted to mention was I know we talked about emotion and how we're not necessarily good with it, but to not use forgiveness work as an excuse to not feel the human emotion. So if you're feeling anger, you're feeling like crap, and you want to bypass that by just being light and lovely and doing the forgiveness work, that's not necessarily a good thing either.
No, certainly not. And I think, a lot of kind of more new agey things can be accused of helping us to bypass the processes that we need to go through. You need to feel the anger, you need to feel whatever else you're feeling. And that's just a useful signpost for what needs to be addressed. And you have to like let yourself feel it. This is something that also that, that I've learned over the years that I actually do now. Like I don't resist the emotions. Like I almost sink into the emotion now rather than being like, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be sad. I just sink into it and it goes really quickly because what you want to do is move through.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't move through. The reason you get stuck in emotion is that you resist it.
Yeah, exactly.
You stop the movement through. And in fact, if you just allow yourself to move through and feel it, you come out the other side in a very, very smooth way with no upheaval.
Yeah. All right. So forgiveness. Let's do it.
Let's do it. That's a good summary.
Just do it.
And remember to let me know if you like this episode.
Joanna needs to know.
I need to know.
All right. So if you have any questions, whether about forgiveness or anything else, you can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or
email me at joanna@joannahennon.com or PM me on any of the social media. I'm Joanna Hennon throughout.
Excellent. Have a great day. Happy forgiveness.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. I would love to hear from you. I love getting feedback from listeners. Also, I would love for you to join me on Patreon. If you head to patreon.com/hollywharton, that's patreon.com/hollywharton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month and you get exclusive access to content I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A. So I would love to see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for tuning in every week. I really, really appreciate it. I would also appreciate, and I feel like I have a ton of asks here at the end of the episode, but I would also really appreciate knowing what you would like to hear from me. What would you like me to talk about? That's really useful. I don't want to just blab on and on about whatever I feel like every week. I want to know what you want. And I always find that the most interesting episodes to record are the ones that people specifically asked me about. So if you head to hollywharton.com/survey, you will be taken to a survey. It's got 7 questions, I think. None of them are obligatory, so you can answer 1, 2, 3, or all, however many you want. And it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to complete, but it's just basically asking how you want to hear from me and what you want to hear from me about. So that is all for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back next week with another solo episode, and that's all for now. Thanks, and have a great week. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.